Mr. President, for the last few weeks, I've been listening to the Republican leader ask the Majority Leader not to turn the United States Senate into a place where a majority of 51 can do anything it wants. I'm on the floor today to suggest 3 reasons why I believe the Majority Leader will not do that. Number 1, he said he wouldn't. He said he wouldn't. And senators keep their word. Number 2, in 2007, the Majority Leader said to do so would be the end of the Senate. There haven't been many Majority Leaders in the history of the Senate, and I know none of them want to have written on their tombstone, he presided over the end of the United States Senate. And third, the Majority Leader is an able and experienced legislator. And he knows that if Democrats find a way to use 51 votes to do anything they want to do, it won't be very long till Republicans find a way, if we're in the majority, to use 51 votes to do whatever we want to do. So let me take those 3 reasons one by one. First, the Majority Leader's given his word. The Republican leader mentioned that. At the beginning of the last 2 Congresses, at the request of the Republican leader, I worked with several Democrats and Republicans to change the rules of the Senate to make it work better, and we succeeded in that. We talked about it, negotiated, and we voted those changes through. We eliminated the secret hold. We abolished 169 Senate-confirmed positions. We expedited 273 more. We reduced the time to confirm district judges. We made it easier to go to conference, and in exchange for all that, the Majority Leader said he would not support changes in the rules in this 2-year session of Congress except through the regular order. He said, the Minority Leader and I have discussed this on numerous occasions. This is the Democratic leader. The proper way to change the Senate rules is through the procedures established in the rules, and I'll oppose any effort in Congress or the next to change the Senate rules other than through the regular order. I'd like to ask consent to include, following my remarks, the Majority Leader's comments.
Without objection.
Second, Mr. President, I was a new senator 10 years ago in 2003. I was absolutely infuriated by what the Democrats did in the first few months. And for the first time in history, they used the filibuster to deny a president's judicial nominations for the circuit courts of appeal. It had never, ever been done before. So Republicans threatened the so-called nuclear option. We threatened that we would change the rules of the Senate so that we could work our will with 51 votes. Senator Reid said at the time that would be the end of the Senate, and he wrote that in his book called The Good Fight in 2007. It is the most eloquent statement that I have heard about why changing the rules of the Senate to give a majority the right to do anything it wants with 51 votes is a bad idea. I'd like to read just a few sentences from Senator Reid's book, The Good Fight, written in 2007. Senator Frist, he wrote, who was Majority Leader, had decided to pursue a rules change that would kill the filibuster for judicial nominations. Sounds familiar. And once you opened the Pandora's box, Senator Reid said, it was just a matter of time before a Senate leader who couldn't get his way on something moved to eliminate the filibuster for regular business as well. And that, simply put, would be the end of the United States Senate. Senator Reid continued, it's the genius of the founders that they conceived the Senate as a solution to the small state, big state problem. And central to that solution was the protection of the rights of the minority. A filibuster is the minority's way of not allowing the majority to shut off debate. And without robust debate, the Senate is crippled. Such a move would transform the body into an institution that looked like the House of Representatives, where everything passes with a simple majority. Senator Reid continues, and it would tamper dangerously with the Senate's advise and consent function as enshrined in the Constitution. If even the most controversial nominee could simply be rubber-stamped by a simple majority, advise and consent would be gutted. Trent Lott of Mississippi knew what he was talking about, Senator Reid said in 2007, when he coined the name for what they were doing, the nuclear weapon. Just one more paragraph. But that was their point. They knew If they trifled with the basic framework of the Senate like that, it would be nuclear. They knew that it would be a very radical thing to do. They knew it would shut the Senate down. And there will come a time when we will be gone. This is Senator Reid talking. There will come a time when we will all be gone, and the institutions that we now serve will be run by men and women not yet living. And those institutions will either function well because we've taken care of them, or they'll be in disarray and someone else's problem to solve. Well, because the Republicans couldn't get their way of nominating some radical judges confirmed to the federal bench, they were threatening to change the Senate so fundamentally that it would never be the same again. In a fit of partisan fury, they were trying to blow up the Senate. This is Senator Reid talking. Senate rules could only be changed by 2/3 vote of the Senate or 67 senators. The Republicans were going to do it illegally. With a simple majority of 51, Vice President Cheney was prepared to override the Senate parliamentarian. Future generations be damned. Those are the words of the distinguished senator from Nevada in 2007, eloquently explaining why this body is so different than the House of Representatives. And I would ask consent not only to include those remarks, but several more pages from Senator Reid's excellent 7th chapter entitled The Nuclear Option in his book from 2007.
Without objection.
And finally, and third, Mr. President, if the Democrats can turn the Senate into a place where a majority of 51 can do anything they want, soon a majority of 51 Republicans are going to figure out the same thing to do. And after 2014, some observers have said we might even be in the majority. Senator McConnell might be the Republican leader and the majority leader. Maybe we'll even have a Republican president. So preparing for that opportunity, I would like to suggest the 10 items, briefly, that I would like to see on an agenda if we Republicans are able to pass anything we want with 51 votes, as the majority leader has suggested. Number 1, repeal Obamacare. Number 2, S2, that'd be the second bill. If I were the leader, I would put up Pell Grants for kids. You know, GI Bill for veterans, Pell Grants, they follow the students to the colleges of their choice, creating opportunity in the best colleges in the world. Why don't we do the same thing for students in kindergarten through the 12th grade? Take the $60 billion we spend, create a voucher for 25 million middle and low income children. It would be $2,200 for each one of them. Just the money we now spend, let it follow them to any school they choose to attend, any accredited school, public or private. Number 3 on my list, complete Yucca Mountain. I've spoken often of the importance of nuclear energy to our country. It provides 20% of all our electricity, 60% of our clean electricity for those concerned about climate change and clean air. Since 2010, the majority leader has stalled the nuclear waste repository in Nevada. That jeopardizes our 100 reactors. That jeopardizes our source of 60% of our clean electricity. If we had 51 votes in the Senate, we could direct the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to issue a license, we could direct the Department of Energy to build Yucca Mountain, and we could fund the money to do it. Now, the junior senator from Nevada, who shares Senator Reid's opposition to that, said something about this recently. The day is going to come that either he's here or not, that's the majority leader, or the Republicans take control and it's a 50-vote threshold. These kinds of issues are the ones that concern me the most, said Senator Heller. When you're from a small state, you need as many arrows in your quiver as possible to fight back on some of these issues that you can be overtaken by. And frankly, the 60-vote threshold is what has protected and saved Nevada in the past. I'd ask consent to include Senator Heller's comments.
Without objection.
Mr. President, of all the Democrats who voted once upon a time for completing Yucca Mountain were to do so again, we could get a bipartisan majority of 51 votes today in the United States Senate to complete Yucca Mountain. So make no mistake, a vote to end the filibuster is a vote to complete Yucca Mountain. Now here's the rest of my list. I'll do it quickly. That I would suggest to the Republican leader, if he were majority leader, his priorities for Senate where we could pass anything we wanted with 51 votes. Make the Consumer Protection Bureau accountable to Congress. That'd be number 4. Number 5, drill an ANWR and build the Keystone pipeline. Number 6, fix the debt. Really ought to be number 1, but Senator Corker and I have a $1 trillion reform of entitlement programs that would put us on the road toward fixing the debt. Number 7, right to work for every state. We'd reverse the presumption, create a presumption of freedom, giving workers in every state the right to work. States would have the right to opt out, to insist on forced unionism, just the reverse of what we have today. No EPA regulation of greenhouse gases. And finally, repeal Davis-Bacon, save taxpayers billions by ending the federal mandate on contractors. Now, Mr. President, the Republican leader and I have plenty of creative colleagues. They'll have their own top 10 lists. And when word gets around on our side of the aisle that the United States Senate will be like the House of Representatives and a train can run through it without anyone slowing it down, there'll be a lot of my colleagues with their own ideas about adding a lot of cars to that freight train. Mr. President, John Meacham's book about Thomas Jefferson is one I've been reading. He reports a conversation between John Adams and Jefferson in 1798. Adams said, "No republic could ever last which has not had a Senate strong enough to bear up against all the popular storms and passions. Trusting a popular assembly for the preservation of our liberties is implausible." Alexis de Tocqueville, traveling our country in the 1830s, saw only 2 great threats for our young democracy. One was Russia, one was the tyranny of the majority. And finally, as the Republican leaders so well stated, there's no excuse here for all this talk. The Democrats are manufacturing a crisis. To suggest that Republicans are holding things up unnecessarily is absolute nonsense. In fact, over the last 2 Congresses, we've made it easier for any president to have his or her nominations secured. The Washington Post on March 18, Congressional Research Service on March 23rd said that President Obama's nominations for cabinet are moving through the Senate at least as rapidly as his 2 predecessors. Since then, the Secretary of Energy has been confirmed 97-0. There may be another 3 up this week. And then, as the Republican leader said, look at the executive calendar. Only 3 district judges waiting. As for filibusters, according to the Senate historian, the number of Supreme Court justices who've been denied their seats by filibuster is 0. The only possible exception, Zabe Fortas and Lyndon Johnson engineered a 45-43 vote so he could hold his head up while he continued to serve on the court. The number of cabinet members who've been denied their seats by filibuster in the history of the Senate is 0. The number of district judges who've been denied their seats by filibuster in the history of the Senate is 0. This is according to the Senate historian and the Congressional Research Service. So what are they talking about? I know what they're talking about. They're talking about circuit judges. That's the only exception. And why is it an exception? It's because when I came to the Senate 10 years ago, the Democrats broke historical precedent and blocked 5 distinguished judges of President Bush by a filibuster. Republicans have returned the favor and blocked 2 of President Obama's by a filibuster, which should be a lesson for the future to those who want to change the rules. About half the Senate, Mr. President, is in its first term. They may not know about the majority leader's statements in 2007. They may not know about the history of the Senate. They may have heard all these conflicting facts and not having the right facts. What I've given you is what the Senate historian and Congressional Research Service says is the facts. Of course, there have been delays. My own nomination was delayed 87 days by a Democratic senator. I didn't try to change the rules of the Senate. President Reagan's nomination of Ed Meese was delayed a year by a Democratic Senate. And no one has ever disputed our right in the Senate, regardless of who was in charge, to use our constitutional duty of advise and consent to delay and examine, sometimes to cause nominations to be withdrawn, or even to defeat nominees by a majority vote. And yes, some sub-cabinet members have been denied their seats by a filibuster. The Democrats denied John Bolton his post on the United Nations. And Senator Warren Rudman told me the story of how the Democratic senator from New Hampshire blocked his nomination by a secret hold. Nobody knew what was happening. And I asked Senator Rudman what he did about it. He said, I ran against the so-and-so in the next election, and I beat him, and that's how Rudman got to the Senate. So in summary, Mr. President, the idea that we have a crisis of nominations is absolute, complete nonsense, totally unsupported by the facts. It should be embarrassing to my friends on the other side to even bring it up. They should be congratulating us for helping to make it easier for any president to move nominations through. And the advise and consent is a constitutional prerogative that both bodies have always defended. So there are three reasons why the majority leader will not turn the Senate into a place where a majority of 51 can do anything it wants, in my judgment. One, he said he wouldn't, and senators keep their word. Two, he said the nuclear option would be the end of the Senate, and no majority leader wants written on his tombstone, he presided over the end of the United States Senate. And three, if Democrats turn the Senate into a place when 51 senators can do anything they want, it won't be long before Republicans do the same. And to be very specific, if Senator Reid and Democrats vote to allow a majority to do anything they want in the United States Senate and set that precedent, voting to end the filibuster will be a vote to complete Yucca Mountain. So, Mr. President, I come today with respect to the Republican and the Democratic leader, and especially to this institution, to say, let's end the threats, let's stop the nonsense, let's get back to work on immigration and the other important issues facing our country. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.